For centuries, humanity looked to the stars and found only silence. We searched for any sign that we weren't alone in this vast, empty cosmos. Our most powerful telescopes scanned the void. Our smartest AI is sifted through billions of signals. Probes drifted past the edge of our own solar system, and every time, the answer was the same. Nothing. The universe felt ancient, endless, and utterly empty. Then, in the year 2147, the silence broke. It started at the Deep Space Listening Array, a massive station orbiting the dark side of the moon. On a quiet shift, the station's AI flagged an anomaly, a signal. It wasn't random, it wasn't natural. It was structured, precise, mathematical, a repeating sequence of numbers, broadcasting every 13 seconds. Within hours, the world knew humanity had finally found them. We celebrated. News networks exploded with excitement. Scientists debated, philosophers questioned. It felt like a new dawn for our species. But the celebration didn't last. The signal wasn't a greeting. It was a key. 3 days after it began, the Deep Space Array went haywire. The station's AI started executing commands on its own, streaming data into deep space. Then the signal changed. The numbers vanished. A distortion appeared in space, a fracture in reality itself. Near the edge of our solar system, space began to bend and warp. Then, it tore open. What came through wasn't a ship, it was them. Massive, skeletal creatures, larger than skyscrapers, emerging from the tier. Their bodies were covered in black, light-absorbing armor. Their limbs ended in razor-sharp claws, and their heads held glowing red eyes that burned like dying stars. Hundreds of them, then thousands. We would later call them the Ancients. In that moment, we just called them nightmares. Panic gripped the Earth. Our governments mobilized the largest space fleet in human history. We had spent a century preparing for first contact, but we never prepared for this. The first battle took place near Mars. Admiral Reyes, commander of the fleet, sent a warning. Unknown life forms, you are entering restricted space. Change course immediately. There was no reply. Reyes gave the order. Fire. Hundreds of plasma cannons lit up the darkness, striking the nearest creature. Its armor cracked. But then, the impossible happened. The creature healed. The wounds closed in an instant. It turned, and for the first time, it noticed us. It moved faster than anything we'd ever recorded, crossing thousands of kilometers in a heartbeat. Its claws sliced through the lead warship like it was paper. The rest of the fleet unleashed everything they had. Missiles, lasers, railguns. It didn't matter. The Ancients were unstoppable. They tore through our ships one by one. In minutes, our greatest fleet was nothing but floating debris. The survivors fled back to Earth, carrying a terrifying truth. We were not the dominant species in the universe. Not even close. The creatures were heading for Earth, and then the signal returned. But this time, it carried a message, translated instantly across every screen on the planet. 3 simple lines. The prison is open. The Ancients are free. Your world will feed them. 3 hours later, the first one hit our atmosphere. It landed outside a city in northern Asia, the impact shaking the continent. It stood, 300 meters tall, and it screamed, a sound that vibrated through your very bones. Then, it began to hunt. Tanks, jets, artillery, nothing worked. Cities burned as more of them descended from the sky. We had awakened something that was meant to be locked away forever. But humanity had one thing they didn't expect. We are fragile, we are weak, but we have the will to fight impossible wars. As the world burned, Earth's leaders made a decision. If this was our end, we would not go quietly. Deep beneath a mountain, a secret project was activated. A weapon for a war no one thought would ever come. Inside a vast hangar, a single pilot stepped into a towering combat suit, a mech armed with enough power to level cities. Humanity's final weapon. The pilot looked at the burning world on the screens around him and whispered, "Let's show these monsters why humans are dangerous." The real war for Earth was about to begin. Thanks for watching. The world was burning. Across every continent, the sky had turned dark with smoke and fire as the monstrous beings known as the Ancients descended from orbit. Cities collapsed beneath their massive claws. Entire armies vanished in seconds. Humanity's most powerful weapons had already failed. Missiles, plasma cannons, nuclear strikes, none of it stopped them. The creatures healed faster than any damage humans could inflict. But humanity had not yet used its final weapon. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, inside a classified military complex known only as Fort Titan, the last line of defense was waking up. Inside a massive chamber, a giant combat suit stood motionless, 3 meters tall, covered in reinforced black alloy plating. Energy lines glowed across its armored body like veins of lightning. Mounted on its arms were weapons capable of destroying entire battlefields. This machine was called Aegis. It had been designed decades earlier during a secret military project that most governments believed unnecessary. The project had one purpose: prepare for the day humanity faced something stronger, something unstoppable, something not from Earth. Now that day had arrived. Inside the armor stood Captain Elias Ward, a veteran soldier who had spent 15 years training to operate the suit. He had never expected to use it. No one had. But as alarms echoed through the underground facility, the reality of the situation was impossible to ignore. Earth was losing. Fast. A technician's voice echoed through Ward's helmet. "Captain, power core is stable. Neural link synchronized." Ward flexed his fingers. The massive metal hand of the suit moved perfectly with him. Weapon systems, fully armed. Outside the bunker, another emergency alert flashed across the screen. Satellite footage appeared in the control room. One of the Ancients had reached the outskirts of Denver. The creature towered over the city like a living skyscraper. Its claws tore through buildings like paper. Highways collapsed beneath its weight. Thousands of civilians were still trapped inside the city. The commander of Fort Titan spoke calmly. "Captain Ward, it's time." The massive blast doors above the chamber slowly opened. For the first time, the combat suit stepped into daylight. The sky above the mountains burned red with fire. And somewhere in the distance, the Ancient roared. Ward launched the suit forward. The thrusters in the armor's back ignited with blinding blue flames. Within seconds, the giant machine was flying toward the city. Military aircraft flew beside him. Fighter jets and gunships formed a protective escort. But everyone knew the truth. This mission wasn't about protection. It was about buying time. When Ward reached the city limits, the destruction was worse than he expected. Entire neighborhoods had been flattened. Smoke covered the skyline, and standing in the center of the ruins was the creature. Up close, the Ancient was even more terrifying. Its black armored body was covered in jagged spikes. Its long limbs ended in claws as large as skyscrapers. Its glowing red eyes scanned the battlefield like a predator searching for prey. The moment it saw Ward's combat suit, it smiled. The creature had never seen a machine like this before, but it understood one thing instantly. This was a threat. Ward locked his targeting system. "You are cleared to engage." Ward pulled the trigger. The suit's primary weapon fired. A massive particle cannon erupted with blinding energy. The beam slammed directly into the Ancient's chest. For the first time since arriving on Earth, one of the creatures staggered. Its armor cracked. The monster roared in pain. Across the battlefield, soldiers watching the fight froze in shock. It worked. Humanity had finally found something that could hurt them, but the victory was short-lived. The Ancient recovered quickly. Its wound began healing immediately. The creature raised its massive claw and struck. Ward barely had time to react. The blow hit the combat suit like a meteor. The machine was thrown across the city, smashing through several buildings before crashing into the ground. Inside the suit, warning alarms exploded. Structural damage detected. Ward forced the machine back to its feet. Blood ran down his forehead inside the helmet. but he wasn't finished. "Round 2, he muttered. The suit launched forward again. This time Ward activated the plasma blade mounted on the armor's arm. A glowing energy sword extended outward, nearly 20 meters long. The ancient attacked again. Its claw swung downward like a falling mountain. Ward dodged at the last second. The plasma blade sliced across the creature's leg. Black alien blood exploded into the air. The monster screamed. For the first time since arriving on Earth, an ancient was bleeding. But the creature wasn't alone anymore. Above the battlefield, dark shapes began descending from the clouds. More ancients. 3 of them, then 5, then 10. Ward looked up at the sky. "Command, we have a problem." The voice on the radio sounded tense. "We see them." The commander paused for a moment. Then he said the words no soldier ever wants to hear. "Captain, you need to fall back." Ward looked around the destroyed city. Thousands of civilians were still evacuating. If he retreated now, the creatures would reach them within minutes. He shook his head. "Negative, Captain. That's an order." Ward's voice remained calm. "If they get past me, the city dies." The radio went silent. Deep inside Fort Titan, the commander closed his eyes. He understood. "Good luck, Captain." Ward tightened his grip on the weapon controls. The first ancient charged toward him. Then another. Then another. Aegis 1 stood alone in the burning ruins of Denver. One machine against an army of monsters from another universe. Ward activated every weapon the suit had. Missiles launched. Cannons roared. Energy blades ignited. The battlefield turned into chaos. Buildings collapsed. Explosions lit up the sky. Ward fought like a machine possessed. He dodged claws that could crush mountains. He fired weapons powerful enough to melt steel. He cut through alien flesh with glowing plasma blades. One ancient fell. Then another. The ground shook with their massive bodies crashing down. But more kept coming. Ward's armor began to fail. Power levels dropped. Weapon systems overheated. And the creatures kept surrounding him. 10 of them now. Maybe more. For the first time since the battle started. Ward realized the truth. He wasn't going to survive this fight. But if he could hold them here, even for a few more minutes, millions of civilians could escape. Ward smiled inside his helmet. Worth it. The suit's reactor began to overload. Inside Fort Titan, technicians noticed the energy spike. "Commander, he's overloading the core." The commander whispered quietly. "Of course he is." Back on the battlefield, Ward activated the final protocol. Aegis 1's power core began building toward a catastrophic explosion. The surrounding ancients sensed the danger. But it was too late. Ward looked up at the sky filled with monsters. "Welcome to Earth," he said. Then he triggered the detonation. A massive explosion lit up the entire horizon. The blast wave flattened everything for kilometers. When the smoke cleared, 6 ancients lay dead. The rest had retreated back into the clouds. And in the ruins of the city, the armor of Aegis 1 lay silent. Humanity had won its first real battle. But the war had only just begun. Because, in orbit, thousands of ancients were still arriving. And somewhere far beyond Earth, something even older was watching, waiting, and smiling. The world breathed a collective sigh of relief. The sky, once choked with the dust of fallen cities and the shadows of monstrous wings, was clear again. We had survived. The first wave, they called it. The ancients, gargantuan beings of unknown origin, had descended upon us without warning, their very presence an act of war. Cities crumbled, armies were annihilated, and for a terrifying moment, humanity stood on the brink of extinction. But we fought back. With desperation as our fuel, and ingenuity as our weapon, we created the Aegis unit's towering mechs, our own man-made titans, designed to meet the invaders on their own terms. We bled, we sacrificed, and we won. The last of the first wave fell, and a fragile peace settled over the scarred planet. We spent the next decade rebuilding. The Aegis program, born from the ashes of our near annihilation, became the cornerstone of our global defense. The Mark I units that had barely secured our victory were retired, replaced by sleeker, more powerful Mark II prototypes. These weren't just machines of war. They were symbols of our resilience, monuments to our refusal to be erased. We studied the wreckage of the fallen ancients, reverse engineering their strange biology and energy sources, integrating what we learned into our own technology. We were ready. We told ourselves that if they ever returned, we would be prepared. We were wrong. We weren't prepared for this. The second coming was not like the first. There was no surprise attack, no sudden chaos. It began with a ripple in space-time, a distortion on the edge of our solar system that our deep space observatories picked up. It was a wound in the fabric of reality, and it was growing. Scientists scrambled, military leaders convened, but no one could explain what it was. Then, from the shimmering tier, they emerged, not in dozens, but in hundreds. This wasn't a wave. It was a flood. The new ancients were different, larger, faster, and sporting biological armor that shrugged off the very weapons that had felled their predecessors. This was the true invasion. The first wave had just been a scouting party. Panic, a familiar and unwelcome guest, swept across the globe, but this time it was tempered with resolve. We had faced them before. We had won. The order was given, and from hidden hangars and fortified bases across the world, the Mark II Aegis units launched. These were the pride of humanity, piloted by the best and brightest. Veterans of the First War and the new generation they had trained. Their mission was clear: intercept the fleet before it reached Earth's atmosphere, push them back into the void. This was our Counterstrike. The battle that followed was unlike anything history had ever recorded. It was a ballet of destruction played out against the silent backdrop of space. Beams of pure energy from the Aegis cannons crisscrossed with the volatile organic projectiles fired by the ancients. Metal giants grappled with biomechanical horrors in a zero-gravity dance of death. On every screen at Central Command, we watched the grim tally. For every ancient we took down, we lost a pilot, an Aegis, a hero. The Mark IIs were powerful, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. The enemy's armor was too strong, their attacks too relentless. Our line was bending, threatening to break. It was during the most desperate hour of the battle, as the Aegis flagship, the Olympus Mons, was about to be overwhelmed, that everything changed. Commander Eva Rostova, in her custom Aegis unit Valkyrie, pushed her reactor past every safety limit. She was trying to create a localized EMP burst, a last-ditch effort to disable the ancients swarming her position. But the energy output, combined with the strange radiation emanating from the enemy fleet, created an unforeseen reaction. A resonance cascade tore through the battlefield. For a moment, all systems, both ours and theirs, went dead. And in that deafening silence, we saw it, or rather, we felt it. A presence. It wasn't physical, not like the ancients. It was a psychic scream that echoed directly in the minds of every pilot, every commander on the bridge, every person tuned into the network. It was ancient, vast, and utterly alien. The ancients, the biomechanical monsters we were fighting, suddenly froze. They ceased their attack, their movements becoming rigid, almost reverent. They turned as one, not towards Earth, but back towards the spatial rift they had emerged from. From the depths of that tier in reality, something stirred. It was a silhouette, a shape so immense it dwarfed the entire invading fleet. It didn't have a defined form, shifting and coalescing like a living galaxy. The psychic pressure intensified. A voice that was not a voice speaking a language we could not comprehend but understood with terrifying clarity. It spoke of cycles, of harvests, of cosmic gardeners tending their crop, and we, along with the ancients, were merely part of that crop. The beings we had been fighting, the monsters we called the ancients, were not the invaders. They were pawns. They were attack dogs, leashed and sent by a master whose scale was beyond our imagination. This entity, this gardener, as the psychic impression branded it in our minds, regarded us with a cold, detached curiosity. It was not angry. It was not malevolent. It was something far worse. Indifferent. We were simply an anomaly in its grand design, a crop that had learned to fight back. The ancients we had been battling began to retreat, pulling back into the rift, their purpose seemingly fulfilled. They hadn't come to conquer us. They had come to test us, to gauge our strength for the one that followed. The rift began to close, the colossal silhouette fading from view. But the psychic voice left a final, chilling message imprinted on our souls. The harvest is not yet ripe, but I will return when it is. The immediate threat was gone. The surviving Aegis pilots, shaken and battered, limped back to Earth. We had survived again, but this was no victory. We hadn't won a war. We had merely survived a preliminary test. We now knew the truth. We weren't fighting an alien species. We were fighting a cosmic force of nature, a being whose motives were as incomprehensible as its power was limitless. The world is quiet again, but it's a different kind of quiet. It's not the silence of peace. It's the silence of anticipation. The silence of a world holding its breath. Our greatest enemy is not the monster at the gate, but the one who holds the leash. The Aegis program is being accelerated beyond all conceivable limits. We are no longer just building weapons. We are trying to forge miracles. We are delving into forbidden sciences, exploring the very nature of reality that the gardener commands. We must evolve, we must ascend, or we will be harvested. The war for survival is over. The war for existence has just begun. Thank you for watching. If this story captured your imagination, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We're just getting started. They came from the abyss, the silent darkness between stars. We called them the ancients. For a generation, they have been our apocalypse, a relentless tide of biomechanical horrors that scoured our cities and drove humanity to the brink of extinction. They adapted, they evolved, they consumed. Our bombs, our bullets, our best-laid plans, all failed. We were pushed back, cornered, with our last bastion huddled in submersible cities, deep beneath the waves that once gave us life. But in the crushing dark, humanity did what it does best. We dreamed of a monster to fight the monsters. We built Leviathan. It wasn't just a submarine. It was a cathedral of vengeance forged from salvaged alloys and desperate genius. 150 souls, the last best hope of our species, embarked on its maiden voyage. I was part of the command crew, a tactical officer tasked with seeing the unseen. Our mission, Operation Deep Strike. We were to hunt down the nexus of their hive mind, a colossal organism believed to be gestating in the Mariana Trench. A single, decisive blow to sever the head of the serpent. Easy, right? The first few days were silent. Eerily so. The sonar was a flat line. The hydrophones picked up nothing but the groans of our own hull under immense pressure. It felt wrong. The ancients were never quiet. They were a symphony of destruction. This silence, it was a prelude. On the 5th day, it broke, not with a roar, but a whisper. A new sonar signature, unlike any we had catalogued. It was fast, agile, and it was hunting in packs. We called them stalkers. They were smaller, sleeker than the lumbering behemoths we'd fought on the surface. They'd evolved for the depths. They'd evolved for us. Alarms blared through the command deck. Multiple contacts, closing fast. They're flanking us. The view screen lit up with red icons swarming our position. Captain Eva Restova's voice cut through the chaos, cold and sharp as glacial ice. Evasive maneuvers, pattern delta. Charge the forward plasma cannons. I want a firing solution yesterday. The Leviathan was a beast, but it was a clumsy one compared to these new threats. They darted through underwater canyons, using the terrain to their advantage, their movements fluid and predatory. They weren't just attacking. They were testing us, learning our every move. Our first volley was a miss. The plasma bolts, powerful enough to vaporize a city block, tore through empty water as the stalkers scattered like startled fish. They were smart. Too smart. They were coordinating, using feints and pincer movements. This wasn't the brute force we were used to. This was tactics. This was war, reinvented in the abyss. A stalker broke through our point defense grid, its jagged carapace scraping against our hull with a sound like tearing metal that vibrated through our bones. Hull breach in Sector Gamma 7, damage control teams, move. We were fighting blind, bleeding, and learning a hard lesson. Our superweapon was built to fight a war that was already over. The enemy had changed the rules. Restova slammed her fist on the console. They're hurting us. Analysis. Now. Find me a pattern. I dove into the sensor data, my fingers flying across the holographic interface. The chaos of their movements wasn't random. It was a net, tightening around us, pushing us toward a specific coordinate. Toward the trench. They weren't trying to destroy us out here. They were delivering us. Captain, I said, my voice tight. It's a trap. They're forcing us into the trench, into a narrow choke point. We lose all maneuverability in there. Rostova looked at the main screen, her eyes fixed on the swirling abyss ahead. And the Nexus is in there, she finished, her voice grim. They're protecting it, using their own bodies to guide us to our doom. We were caught. Turn back, and the swarm would tear us apart in open water. Press forward, and we walk into their kill box. For a moment, silence descended again on the bridge, heavier than the ocean above. Then, a slow smile spread across Restova's face. It was a terrifying sight. They think we're just a bigger gun, she whispered. They think we fight with brute force. They learned our weapons, but they haven't learned about us. She turned to me. Tactical. Forget the cannons. I want you to analyze their communication frequencies. These things are coordinated. Cut the head off the local snake, and the body will flail. It was a radical idea, a gamble of insane proportions. We weren't a battleship anymore. We were a scalpel, while the engineering crew worked frantically to divert power. My team raced against time, sifting through the cacophony of alien biosignals. We found it. A dominant frequency, a command signal pulsing from a larger stalker, the alpha of the pack, hanging back behind its kin. Got it, Captain. Target locked. Fire the signal jammer, Rostova commanded. And give them a little surprise. Launch decoy drones, thermal signatures matching our main reactor. Send them deep into the trench. The plan was set. We would make them think we were taking the bait. A high-frequency pulse erupted from Leviathan, a silent scream in the dark. On the view screen, the disciplined formations of the stalkers instantly shattered. They became a disorganized mob, turning on each other, their predatory instincts now unguided. At the same time, our decoy drones shot into the trench, drawing the bulk of the confused swarm after them. It gave us the opening we needed. All power to engines, Rostova roared. Take us up. Hard vertical ascent. We're not going into their trap. We're going over it. The Leviathan shuddered, groaning in protest as its thrusters fired at maximum, rocketing us toward the upper depths. The remaining stalkers, caught by surprise, were too slow to react. We broke through their scattered lines, leaving chaos in our wake. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were adapting. We were learning. The ancients had evolved, but so had we. This wasn't a battle of firepower. It was a battle of wits. Deep in the crushing black, we had our monster, but we were also rediscovering our greatest weapon, our minds. The hunt for the Nexus wasn't over. In fact, it had just truly begun, and we were ready to fight smarter. The Leviathan had a new purpose, not just as a weapon, but as a symbol of our own evolution. And we would show the ancients that humanity's light could not be extinguished, not even in the deepest, darkest parts of the world. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe for more chronicles from the abyss.